topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello, and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Kamika Edwards, local educator and professional in the mental health field, and I am standing in for Bahia Jackson today. You can find Bahia's website at knowwhatyouwantcoaching@wordpress.com, and you can see descriptions of her diversity education courses and coaching opportunities she offers. We will miss her in her absence, and we hope we make her proud. Today, our show is called Part 2 of Climate and the New Normal, How to Prepare for It. We have two guests today, Dr. Kwabena Asante and Mvondo. Dr. Asante is a climate resilience planner. He supports agencies and communities developing integrated plans for climate change. He serves on the Climate Working Group of the NOAA Science Advisory Board. He has a PhD in Environmental and Water Resources Engineering from the University of Texas at Austin and a BS in Civil Engineering from the University of Nairobi. Our second guest is chair of the Yolo County Climate Action Commission. She's also chair of the Davis Human Relations Commission, Yolo County Restorative Justice Partnership, Interactive Healing Arts Project. She's involved with Multiculturalism Rocks. She's a certified community mediator, and she is a member of the National Association of Climate Resilience Planners. Let's welcome our guests. We have one today and then one on her way, hopefully. So let's please welcome Dr. Kwabena Asante. There she is. Yes. We have both of our guests, and I just introduced their brilliance to you, and so we're going to have a wonderful conversation. Dr. Kwabena and NJ, welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to meet and talk to you again, and so and excited to be here.
Yes.
Thank you, Kamika. Good afternoon, Kwabena. Very excited to be here.
Yes. So just like the topic of our podcast today, we are focusing on getting ready. And so our new normal, how to prepare for it. And so if you can, either of you can start us off with giving us a broad stroke overview of why we're here today.
So if it's okay, I will start, and then I will ask my esteemed colleague here to add to it. I'm very excited that we have this conversation because, life as we used to know it is no longer. So I think that it's important that as a community, not just here in Yolo County, but anywhere else in the world, that it be very clear in our mind that life has changed dramatically, and that has a lot to do with climate change and the fact that our planet is heating up. So as early as a few days ago, in Davis and surrounding areas, we were dealing with heat waves. The reality is that, and this has been published in a variety of newspaper worldwide, during this summer, we are going to register record temperatures of heat. And what I've read again in the newspaper has been that it's going to be the warmest it's ever been on the planet in 120,000 years. So this conversation, I believe, is very needed. In addition to heat waves, we're facing floods, this has been a recurring theme in the past years. So, and again, Kwabene, I'm turning to you in terms of how the climate has drastically changed and how those recurring extreme weather events, are happening. Is there anything you would like to add to the situation, to set up the context for our listeners?
Yeah, NJ. So yeah, I think you've been very eloquent on the topic in opening us up. Obviously, we're sitting here in the middle of what is now one of the warmest years on record. We've seen actually you mentioned a week of extreme heat like we haven't seen in just many millennia. And uh, the earlier in the year in California, we saw massive flooding. The Tulare Lake Basin, which had been a dried up lake bed, suddenly forming and becoming a lake, growing into a lake pretty much the size of Lake Tahoe. Just during the course of this one year, and it's going to persist over many more years. And so these changes are here with us, and in some ways, it's we're still waiting for the world to have that big reaction. We're seeing massive changes in the physical environment. Oceans getting extremely warm. We're talking about in Florida again this past week. Temperatures over 4 degrees, breaking the record by 4 degrees. The ocean temperatures. I mean, pretty much they're talking about ocean temperatures that would resemble what you'd expect in your shower when you take a warm shower at home. Um, what it's going to do to ocean life, it's difficult to imagine. But at the same time, we are all often enjoying and living our regular lives, and so that disconnect between what's happening in the physical world and kind of our response to it, in some ways, is just disconcerting, to say the least.
And I want to add to that, Kwabena, that what we haven't mentioned here are also fires. We're entering fire season. And I want to give a shout out to our elected officials, our firefighters, and community organizers who for the past years have been helping us get ready. There's been control burns, there's been a variety of initiatives that have been taken. And so far we have been, I want to say, blessed and lucky to not be dealing with fires in Yolo County. But the reality is that this season, the summer, is fire season for us and for many other people all over the world. And then last but not least, not to dwell on that, there are massive floods in Spain right now, and in Italy, and in some parts of France, in Europe. And this is not normal at this time of the year. They shouldn't be dealing with a flood during the summer.
So you both mentioned the global impact, the national impact, the local impact, and I'm curious about the personal impact. I'm curious where you both got involved in the climate change work.
Yeah, and if I may go first, Kamika. So personally, I entered the field of water resources engineering, just essentially driven by my own experiences. I was born and grew up in at least my early years were spent in Ghana, which is in the tropical region of West Africa. So you live with and take for granted all the greenery around you, the trees, heavy rains, and then early in my life, I would say probably at the age of 8, we moved to what is now South Sudan, and the just the jarring translation of moving from a tropical environment into a harsh semi-desert environment, long, dry seasons and short, intense rainfalls, which basically transform a desert into a living environment and with lots of trees and all of that, almost resembling the tropics again when it rains. living in those experiences essentially got me excited about water, and kind of the possibilities there. And there were a number of experiences like that, seeing the changes that came about in the Nile River itself, which passed not too far from our house in the Sudan, seeing the conflicts that arose as they tried to develop water resources, and long-lasting conflicts. Again, these kind of brought home to me the need for us to bring together the development of water resources, the balancing that with the needs of people to maintain all the benefits that they enjoy from rivers, ability to cross and use rivers as fishing locations, rivers to support other parts of their livelihood, just for their enjoyment, for their livelihoods. And so striking that balance for me has been kind of my the part of this work that I've enjoyed the most. And if I may just add one more kind of, for me, transformational moment. In the early part of my career, I went to work for the U.S. Geological Survey, and our focus was mostly international work, mostly focused in regions that were suffering droughts, floods, kind of huge weather extremes. And for many years, we did this work. Every year, it seemed like we were jumping from one place to another, trying to support the communities in those situations.
I
And
see
at
you
some
sticking
point,
band-aids. I see you sticking band-aids all over the place.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. At some point, it just occurred to me, you know what? Maybe we can move away from the chasing the event to getting ahead of the event. Um, and so when I left the U.S. Geological Survey, one of my first initiatives was to try to set up a climate analytics platform that would support communities, kind of look ahead, try to move into kind of proactively trying to mitigate their damage. And the nature of my work has evolved over time, but really it's still kind of the key thing to which what I derive the most joy from. So
Yes. Thank you for sharing your formative experiences that got that led, everything. Everything happens for a reason, and so we appreciate you sharing those early experiences to how they shaped you to where you are now. NJ, how did you get involved in climate change?
Thank you. I'm happy to share. Before I dive into it, I kept smiling a lot when I was listening to Kwabena because I'm looking at this frame, and the fact that we are three African and African American people talking about climate action, and I am saying more of that, please, because I just want to use this moment as a reminder that when it comes to climate change and the people involved in raising awareness and doing the job, it is such an incredibly ethnically, socioeconomically diverse space, and I want to recognize it. I want to give it a big shout out because I believe that sometimes the media don't do it justice. They tend to center a certain type of people doing this work, a certain type of people being impacted, and I'm saying enough of that. So, Baya, who is the host of this podcast, is not here today. But Baya, thank you for opening that space to such a vast, diverse array of voices. Now back to your question. So
Thank you.
you started out, yeah, of course. You
An
started
important
out,
recognition.
right?
That was an
You
important
started out,
recognition. Can I wait? I'm gonna
yeah.
hold
Go
your
for
thought
it.
for a
Go for
minute.
it.
I just wanted to show my shirt with different fists of different colors, and
there you
how it's
go.
gonna take all of us. How it's gonna take all of us to how it's going to take all of us to work together. So I wore a special shirt to symbolize what you just said, to acknowledge what you just said. So thank you, NJ.
I so appreciate it. Thanks for wearing that shirt today. Uh,
So to your
uh,
beginning, how did you start?
yes. So how did I start? And also the first question you had asked was how have I been personally impacted by climate change? And I actually want to start by that. you
Yes.
know all the events that we described earlier and that are also happening locally, it's first of all, impact on our health. And I know I'm speaking, I'm sharing what many have experienced. So when we're dealing with the heat wave, so hopefully now there is better public communication, better PSAs. People know what to do to protect themselves besides staying indoor. We need to be creative in finding ways to be cooler. Not everyone has access to an AC and so on. And then in some cases, that has happened in Davis, because the heat is so extreme, we experience power outages. And that again, we have important senior community also living here. Some people need 24/7 access to electricity for their pacemaker, for their ventilator, for other reasons of medication they have that needs to stay at a certain temperature. So in how I've been impacted, I just noticed that if I'm stepping out during a heat wave, even just for a minute, not even a full minute or something, I just have to deal with massive headaches, and I can be like just out for the rest of the afternoon, having to lie down, and really my body being in shock. So again, this is something very real. It sends people to the hospital. Some people die from heat exhaustion. So just again, a plea to our listener to really keep an eye out on what's happening with the weather, and make sure that how to best take care of yourself. That you have a plan also for if you're out of power, how to conserve, the fresh produce you have, and things along those lines. Without, goes without saying that also I'm scheduling my days around that. Whether I'm taking a meeting or not depends on the temperature. I didn't used to do that really until this year, but I am looking very hard. I'm getting invitations, but checking the weather first. What it will be the temperature of the day? Is the event happening indoor or outdoor? Now Kwabena and me, we are working. Our work, involves us in climate action, and in my case, I'm also a community organizer. So um, there is, and this is tying into the question you asked me, how I became involved, in this work and in this space. I grew up in Cameroon, so I was born in Europe, but I grew up in Cameroon. We have a philosophy of life that is very different from what we observe in the Western world, in that we from the moment we are born, we are taught to be very respectful of our natural environment. We are reminded that we are sharing the space with other beings, and we also consider plants, as living beings. We grow up with the value of only take what you need, to stay alive. So mass production was introduced with colonization, and that has done some damages, of course, to our forest and the rest of the ecosystem, and that has a global impact. So I became a climate justice activist without knowing that I was on. Again, just by way of life. My family early on, also because of the way life was back then, right, where power outages are something that is a frequent happening, not just because maybe the current infrastructure is not the best or the strongest, but it was actually by design for the government in order to encourage a population to not overuse that energy. So we planned around that, right? So I grew up not learning not to rely only on electric appliances. So it's nice that we have, a mixer, that you can plug, and then that can do all types of things, your bread and so on. But literally, I've made a point of always having also something that I can operate without needing to plug it, with electricity. And I think that is a knowledge that is lost. And I wish more community members remember that when we have an event in Davis like Whole Earth Festival, I'm hoping that there are people signing up to have a booth where they educate about those resources. Something like a washing machine, right, to wash your clothes, that exists without you having to power it up. It's something that we need to remember. It's something that is useful to have. It's useful to, for example, people working with our house community. That type of resources will be good to introduce there, as well. We are using less electricity. that is not a bad thing for the environment, quite the opposite. And that can also provide some independence to people needing it the most, meaning that they have access to a certain level of necessities, comforts, essentials, without having to pay a high price for that. So naturally, when I left Cameroon, when I lived, went back to Europe, lived there, moved to the United States, I just took those values with me.
Yes.
um, and then the last thing I want to share about that is that I think that every single human being on this planet is a closeted environmental justice activist if they have not already come out. The reason I say that is because we need to all care. Literally, if we're not paying attention to how we're doing life and how that is impacting our environment, we are harming our health. It's not even a matter of tomorrow, we need to leave a better world for our kids tomorrow. It's happening already today with everything that Kwabena and I described. Air quality, water quality are issues that we're dealing with now. So the necessity, the fact that I care about my community, that we're doing life together, that if my neighbor is not okay, I am also not okay, whether I'm aware of that or not, it's just going to get to me too. Those are all the reasons why I'm doing the work I do, and I try to center environmental issues in every other aspect of politics and of life.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Amazing.
yes,
And
definitely.
and Angie, as I listen to you, and every time I hear you speak, I just love the way that you personalize the response to climate change. I think it's an amazing skill. I think it's something that we really need because as we've been talking about the gap between the scale of the issue and where we are right now is really an opportunity for many more of us to be involved. So I really appreciate the perspectives that you bring to this.
Thank you, Kwabena.
So you both mentioned there are a lot of issues. So if you could fast forward to your work in the present, to what are the key issues that you see are the key issues in climate justice, can you kind of fast forward from your childhood and your formative experiences to what you do now, and then tie that into what do you see as the key issues facing us?
Yeah. Well, so if I may just start for a moment, just there's a few issues that that kind of stick with me, and one is, and again, Angie was talking about it in perhaps a very different angle to it, but many of the people that are going to suffer the most severe consequences of climate change um, are folks that are already disadvantaged and perhaps are contributing little, or I should say less, to to the problem, to creating the problem. So if you're unhoused, you're probably not using a lot of electricity on a day-to-day basis. But uh, even though you have some of the lowest emissions, you are going to be some of the first people impacted. The extreme heat being a prime example. Extreme heat right now is killing more folks than any other weather extreme, which is surprising because it doesn't seem to occur for a very long. It's just a few days, a few days of a significant event where temperatures are high during the day. If you're working outside, you're highly impacted. If you step outside of your car, you lose power. You're highly impacted. And then if in the evenings, if it doesn't cool down, well, if you're it impacts your health. It impacts your ability to recover from the day's heat. So if you have underlying health issues, suddenly you're more exposed, and that high nighttime temperatures seem to have even more adverse impacts on health and result in more of the injuries and mortalities. So it's this idea that there's a few the vulnerable communities are going to be even more severely impacted, uh, and that's a challenge. I think for those of us who work in the climate environment, I think the 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 difficulty that we've had in terms of, we've understood the problem for a long time. We've understood, we keep understanding more dimensions of it, but if you think about it, the first real effort to correlate climate to human activity was what, 85 years ago. Guy Callender, a steam engineer, not even a scientist in classical terms. He didn't even have a bachelor's degree. He began publishing papers on the subject. He published the first paper in 1938 and followed on with a series of papers, which we now recognize to be some of the most, the best early papers on the subject. So the messaging has been there for a while. Now, for a long time, scientists try to communicate the message directly to decision makers and struggled with that. Scientists are very good in the lab. They're very good at presenting their results in papers, but they assumed they were very good at communicating with decision makers, and that has not panned out. That there's, we've discovered as we've come along that there's always been a need for a strong core of communicators in the middle, of translators who take the science information and put it into so what does it mean to me, the way NJ does when she expresses what it is that people should be doing. So we need that set of translators to continue to do their work. We also need folks to begin to take the actions. Again, we started out with kind of the big policy questions. Oh, overall, around the globe, we have continuing efforts to try to reduce carbon emissions. That's at the global level, and we've undertaken all sorts of things that have kind of reduced our emissions. The U.S. has, over the past 10 years, reduced its emissions maybe, I don't know, 10, 15%. So the cuts are beginning to happen on a global level. But some of the most persistent sources of emissions are cars, vehicles on the road, transportation emissions, and those just are stubbornly refusing to go down. What's that going to take? It's going to take individual action. So it's again helping to communicate that difference between there's global policy and kind of the big picture issues, and then what that means for individual communities, and getting people to begin to move. That work of social innovators, of social justice folks, climate justice, environmental justice folks, has been slow in taking effect. I mean, they've been engaged, they've been speaking out, but translating some of that into action has been slow. So to me, that's in terms of the big challenges. That's where I see where we need to expend more effort.
And to summarize, if I understood correctly, I heard you say, in this is not climate change, and the need for climate action is not a new issue. It's been around for 85 or plus years, and the science, the first issue is we need translators to boil it down into layman's terms so that the general public like me can understand it, the urgency of the problem. And I heard you say no more conferences, no more talking about it, no more, no more papers. I heard you say it's really time for action is a key issue. And we need those translators to boil it down for the general public to take that personal action. Like my mom, she still uses a clothesline, bless her heart. And when you were talking, NJ, about using those non-mechanical, non-electrical things, I thought about my mom and some of the traditions that she still has as a Mississippi-born citizen. And so she's trying to do her part. We all definitely want to do our part, but we just, sometimes don't know what to do. And so I appreciate the translators like NJ. I appreciate the scientists like Dr. Asante and I, and all of us can do our part. NJ, can you fast forward and tell us about your current work and what do you see as
Yes.
the key issues?
Yes. And thank you for asking. So, um, oh, so I had to pause because I have my hands in several pots. So I was wondering how to best frame it. I think that I can say that one of the biggest component of my work right now in terms of what is taking the most time has been my involvement with the Yolo County Climate Action Commission. So that commission specifically has been tasked with creating a climate action and adaptation plan for the whole county of Yolo in California, the whole region. So what we mean by that is having a plan that sets a goal. The goal of the county is to be carbon negative by 2030, which is very different from many of the climate action goals that in the rest of, I want to say, the state and nationwide, which aim to be carbon neutral by 2040. So we have an ambitious goal because we understand that we are in a state of emergency, and we want to aim as high as possible, so that we get the maximum result. So that also means that every single day, the people who are involved in this effort are doing what they can to create a traction as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Part of the work also, so I'm the chair of that commission. So I'm part of my task is ensuring that there is good communication with all parts involved. It's also a big part of the reason I was appointed to the commission, was to facilitate a high community engagement. So just making sure again that this is a community driven process. We're starting by asking the community to tell us how they have been impacted, some of the solutions that they would like to see implemented. And so basically the big work here is create a bridge between scientists, community members, elected official, um, impacted communities such as the unhoused community, our senior community, but also our youth, making sure that language justice is being addressed. Is the material and the way we are communicating, is it accessible to everyone? Remembering that where we live, English is not the first language of several community members. Back to translators, as Dr. Sante shared, making sure that we are able to break very complex data and assessment of the situation into layman terms, but also that we're able to translate it into what that means for someone living the everyday life. So my work has been to help reconcile the county priorities with people's priorities, and also with industries' priorities. We need to all be working together when it comes to that. So in that sense, I'm an advocate, on various platforms. There are some programs that already exist, to help us reduce how much we're polluting our environment, and help us change some of our lifestyles that are not the best. Um, so I'm also doing my best to amplify the resources that are already there, to identify what are some of the blocks and challenges in community members accessing those resources. Um, and another thing also is, that's a project that I started that is called CAPECA CEPECA, which is a California statewide project bringing together researchers from the University of California, which has several campuses all over the state, but also California State Universities. So those students and researchers are being paired with community leaders, some elected officials, or city or county staff. And what we are trying to do is to look into ways that model of collaboration, academia, government, community members can work together in not just addressing the problem, but implementing solutions at the local level. What my group is working on in Yolo County, we decided to look at the different climate action and adaptation plans not just the county one, but some of the cities like the city of Davis. And our first goal was to figure out zones of vulnerability in the plan. Very early on, we assessed that those adaptation plans, all of the ones that we had come across, also outside of Yolo County, never included the unhoused community. And that is a gross oversight.
Yes.
They need to be included in the plan. They need to be part of the solution. And it also needs to be assessed and voiced how they are impacted by the problem, heat wave, floodings, and so on. And again, as Dr. Sante, as Kwabena mentioned, they are not the ones that are doing the most damage to our environment, right? So this is just one area of, a little hole and gap that we identified, and that we're working on, trying to provide resources so that elected and government bodies can be on it. The big part of the work that that group is doing, and I will stop shortly after mentioning that. The big part of the work we're doing is also we realize that we are missing updated maps, and specifically interactive maps. So my group has decided to use GIS technology, and I'll let Kwabena go more into depth into what we mean by that. But basically, it's a tool that is used in the field of geography. So we are using that and working with the community to assess zones of vulnerability when it comes to climate change in the county. So we're talking about where are the zones in Yolo County that are the most at risk of fires, the most at risk of flooding, where are the zones where there is food insecurity, and so on. And we are also doing what we call a power asset mapping. So, meaning identifying the key players working on addressing climate change or implementing climate action in the county, who are, identifying the organizations, whether they are, non-profit or grassroots, working on it. Including, who in a government body is doing what, who is a sustainability manager, for example. And we are also identifying existing resources. So the reason for that, by that, for example, I mean, where are the evacuation routes in Yolo County in case of a fire? you know so the reason for that is to enable everyone involved, whether they're in academia, whether they work for the government, whether they're a grassroots organization, giving them those tools to make the work easier. And also,
Yes.
just creating a platform that makes it easier for everyone to share resources and not be at risk of duplicating an effort that is already happening. So I'm going to stop here for now, but those are some of the work that I'm involved with when it comes to today's topic.
So, Kamika, if I may, as NJ was talking, just a question kind of crossed my mind, which is how are you engaging rural communities? We've in some of our work, I think
Mhm.
urban areas are generally a little bit more accessible, a little bit more organized. Getting resources out in rural areas can be challenging.
I am so glad you asked because I have answers. So I will tell you what the Climate Action Commission has done so far with an interesting success rate. It's not enough in terms of results, but I think it was a solid start. So the key to the key in the answer to the question you ask is collaboration. And I mentioned that this work that we're doing is community driven. So what we've been doing is looking for collaborators, and we found several. And one key collaborator, so the way to we've been successful in engaging rural communities has been to go where they are, not create an event and we're asking them come to us. There's going to be food, there's going to be this and that, etc. Just find a way to get here.
A very common
When
strategy.
we're talking about equity really has to do with giving everyone access to something that they need. Whether we're talking about a job and so on, in this case information resources, we need their input. So Kwabena, what we've done is go in the rural communities, and this is practically what had happened. One of our partners, and I'm just again big shout out, librarians are heroes. One of our partner has been the Yolo County Library. The Yolo County Library is in many parts of Yolo. They are in Knights Landing, they are in Espardo, they are in the tiny town of Yolo, which has, I think, like 400 residents. you know, uh, they are in many places, and they very graciously, they were rolling out back in April a series of events, community events, in Spanish and in English. They heard about the work we're doing. I want to give a shout out in Yolo County to the different departments of Yolo County, including health and human services, child welfare, services, and so on, because they have invited not just me, but our sustainability manager to give talks, to talk about, let us know what's happening with climate action, with climate change, what are the environmental issues in the county right now that we're working on, because our agency is wondering how we can support that effort. We are also wondering how the people we serve are impacted, to see if we can adjust the services that we are offering, to make it also easier for them to be part of the solution and to have a voice and to be heard. So finding partners who are very active in rural communities has been key for us. And then another tip for anyone listening and doing this work: find out what events are already happening. Sometimes you don't need to be the one creating an event. Find out which event is already happening. A quick example: right now, at the time of the recording of this episode, it's the summer, which means that there are lots of fairs happening. County fair is happening, state fair is happening. These are great venues to hit a lot of people at the same time with excellent information that they need. You can make it fun, you can make it a workshop, and so on. Go to the community you're trying to reach, right? Whether we're talking, let's say, maybe farm workers. And again, just found out, when do you have a gathering? And then, contribute. I can bring this and that, I'll cover your food. Can we come and just say a few words, or can we come and share a survey? Whichever way you decide to engage them. But again, to make a long story short, and to summarize my answer to your question, the key is to go where the community is at, and to try to fit their schedule. Try to be the least disruptive possible. Find the right partners, people already active in that community.
Really love that. Lots of pearls of wisdom in there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I also love the metaphor of a bridge, bridging the scientists to the community-based organizations. And, the bridge is covering those furthest from opportunity because of finances or other barriers, equity barriers, and or location like those in the rural cities. And so, I heard you say collaboration is needed to build that bridge and to cover those furthest from opportunity, and I also heard you say mobilization, to mobilize the different partners, to get them on the same page to take the action. And you set high expectations, like they say, shoot for the moon, you'll hit the stars. And so we admire your goal of being carbon negative by 2030, and we want to support your work. And so we know that there's challenges and obstacles with every endeavor. And so I ask about what are the barriers, what are the obstacles that you both face in your work for climate justice.
Thank you. I get started as a change. Thanks for asking that. Here are some of the identified challenges from my perspective, being involved in the work I do. Number one is our county and our cities don't have an environmental justice framework right now. And what I mean by that, for example, when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, sorry, I'm good now. Our city and county staff are trained. They go every year to a bit of a training, which is either first time for them or refresher, right? But I believe that given how drastically life has changed on planet Earth, we also at the government level need an environmental justice training for cities and county employee every year. And what I mean by that is that, again, I started this conversation by explaining that environmental issues intersect with other aspects of life, including at the government level. I think it will be helpful for our employees, city and county employees, to just have a sense of, oh, someone is coming to ask for a permit for their house. this is also the bit of information I can give them related to that issue that's going to be more sustainable for them and more friendly. But in order for the employee to even be able to think that way, again, a little bit of training is necessary. So the fact that that component is missing right now in the decision making process, to me, is a big challenge. What I see too much is still that archaic thought, I'm just going to call it for what it is, of thinking that climate issues, environmental justice, environmental issues are an isolated component, that
Hmm.
it just has to do with air quality, water quality, the trees are, whether the trees are healthy or not. Excellent. This is archaic. We shouldn't be thinking that way anymore. There is an intersection between environmental issues and housing issues, and transportation issues, and zoning, planning, different codes, etc., etc. We need to be, the staff needs to be trained when it comes to that. Our elected official now need to be in a mindset of always integrating that aspect of the decision into the picture. And then the another thing is communication. I think that the communication between the people making decisions or deciding on which program they're going to lay out, that communication with the rest of us, with the public, needs to be better. You're not always reaching everyone when you're posting something on Facebook or Instagram, because your city or county has an Instagram account, and also via a newsletter. We need to be creative in how we are sharing the message. So I
Hmm.
believe that it shouldn't just be a text. We need to, back to collaboration, reach out to your theater companies, local theater companies, reach out to artists, reach out to organizations that have nothing to do with climate justice, to your hairdresser. Why? Because they service thousands of people in one single week, right? So maybe you can collaborate with them, give a stipend or something to have an event, because when they put the word out, they literally reach thousands of people at once. So just being creative, in how we're communicating, the formatting of the message, having an environmental justice framework which doesn't exist yet, are some of the things that I think standing in the way of efficiency. And I'm going to stop here and give the floor to Kwabena.
And I'll just be quick. I think you've said many of the key things. And the only thing that I would add is right now, this moment, there's a big opportunity. The federal government has essentially making lots of money available for implementing projects to enhance your resilience. So right now is the moment for you to take advantage of those opportunities. And how do you do that? Well, if you're involved in actually pursuing some of those funds, this is the time to do it.
Mhm.
Uh, but most important, support leaders who are willing, who have
Yes.
shown an inclination to go in that direction. And Angie, I'm just going to use you an example here. I know you stood up to stand for election. Support leaders who can espouse these types of positions, who are going to pursue, who have the vision to pursue these types of funds, these types of opportunities to make your community more resilient to climate, which is now with us, the hazards, the risk that it brings.
That sounds like a call to
Kamika.
action. That sounds like a call to action, people. This climate justice is political, and so you can exercise your voice through by voting for legislators who do care about our common home, planet Earth. What's your call to action, NJ?
Well, I want to start by thanking Dr. Asante for the shout out. He was referring to me running for office to represent Davis District 4 on the Yolo County Board of Supervisor. My call for action is for our listeners to a couple of things. Be involved of what the situation is where you live. Being, be aware of what the needs are where you live. Reach out to educators, reach out to teachers as well. Reach out to your city or county sustainability manager if you have one of those. If you don't have any, reach out to a non-profit, an organization doing that work, and ask them how you can support, ask them what they're doing, and also find out what can be done at an individual level. The moment you have that information, make it your mission to share it with your neighbor. Organize a neighborhood party if needed. Make it fun. But my point is, you can do your part by being informed, and then by sharing the information, and by putting a call of action yourself.
I'd like to take this moment to thank my guest today and thank Bahia for putting us together to share the message with the world that all of us can do something to save our planet, and that Dr. Asante and NJ, we appreciate the work that you are doing in your community for us all. So thank you for your call to actions, and we appreciate your sharing your talents and your vision with us for a better future.
And thank you so much for having us.
Of course.
Thank you, Kamika. Thank you, Dr. Asante.
Thank you.
Be sure to tune in to It's Your Voice next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY.com or Talk for TV. May we all have enriching conversations and diversity this week. And thank you for listening.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech.